Listening? Laptop's away. You don't need your laptop at the moment. Here we go. Now, I did do the solutions up here last night for you to have a look at so that you understand the technique. Even if you've handed the sheet in, the solutions still be here for you to learn. This is me summarizing exercise 9E and 9G. Okay, so instead of doing 9E and 9G, you can do this worksheet and it shows to me that you'll be ready for next year's topic. Okay, so these are the important skills that you need to know for next year. It gets much more difficult next year in terms of fractions, but the basics is there. That's why I wanted you to do this exercise, or at least this worksheet. Okay, now let's recap. Y equals mx plus c. We know that this is the rule for only linear equations. Now, what is linear again? What does linear mean?
Straight line.
Straight lines, very good. So only for straight lines that this is the correct rule for it. Now, let's recap on your notes. What is C again in your notes? What was C meant to be? What does C represent?
Y-intercept.
Y-intercept. So if you don't have that, can you please write this down? C is your y-intercept. Now, you learned that the y-intercept was when you don't know what y is, but you know that the x has to be what? 0. Very good. So whatever that c value is, that is... You leave it as a fraction. You don't have an... No, m's not your x-intercept. A lot of students confuse that. C is only... The only one for this exception is the y-intercept. Okay, so the theory I gave to you what an x-intercept, y-intercept is, that will apply all the way to year 12. You have to stick to the same theory. Listening? Shh, 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 shh. Thank you. And lastly, M. I gave you 2 rules essentially for M. M was the pattern for Y over the pattern of X. Okay, so we had Pat. I'm going to write Pat up here to remind you. That's what you did in exercise 9B. But then I gave you a rule that as long as you have 2 points, only 2 points, you can figure out what the gradient is, or M is. So what was the rule again? How do you find M again? What's the rule?
y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1.
Very good. Okay, so exercise 9F, I asked you to work on that exercise because I needed you to get more familiar with this rule. Okay, so you just needed 2 points in order to do this. So here's the example. What you'll be doing now is, unlike before, the exercise before, you had to get an equation. You got an equation and then you had to sketch it. Most of you did really well yesterday in doing that. Now it's the reverse. What if you don't have the equation, but you have the graph? How would you get the equation? Okay, so this is how we do it. We know that this is a straight line. So because it's a straight line, we know it has to be this form. Okay, you only use this form when you know it's a straight line equation. And so from the graph, you can tell it's a straight line. That's why I'm using this rule. Okay, if it's a different graph, you can't use it. Yes, Michael?
With the y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, and so I was doing it last night as well, and I keep getting like the right answer, but it's upside down. So like as in with this one, I'm pretty sure it's meant to be 3 over 1, but it's 1 over 3.
Yep. So let's do it together. Let's see why, because you're correct. It's meant to be 3 over 1, but why isn't it 3 over 1? Let's have a look. So Michael likely chose 2 points. Remember, you only need 2 points to sketch a line and also to tell an equation. So right now we can see there are 2 points. There are 0, 3 and negative 1, 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it down. I'm going to say, all right, so I've got negative 1, 0, and I've also got 0, 3. These are my 2 points. Now, in my videos that I've made for exercise 9F, I said that it doesn't matter which one is the first one or the second one. Okay, so I can call this the first point, and I can call this the second point. It doesn't matter. Okay, either one doesn't matter. From here, this is your x coordinate. So we call it the x, but because it's the x coordinate of the first point, we call it x1. This then is then the y coordinate, but because it's of the first point, we call it y1. So if you have a look over here, then 0 is your x coordinate of the second point. So what would you call it? X what?
x2.
X2, because this is the second point, right? And it's the x coordinate of the second point. then this is, yeah, very good, Logan. So this is y2. Once you've labeled it correctly, and it is important, in year 9, I find the students tend to mix this up, and that's the only time that you get it wrong. Okay, if you label it correctly, you put it correctly, it shouldn't be wrong. So let's see where Michael might have done it differently, because he's right, it's meant to be 3/1. So it doesn't matter which one you do it, but if you follow the rule, it should work. So let's have a look. So M, we said it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's put in the numbers. Y2, which we called 3. So I'm going to write down 3. I'm going to say, okay, so that's 3 minus, what's my y1? 0. Very good, because I labeled y1 over here. That was my 0. So I'm now going to say subtract 0 divided by, which one's my x2?
0.
Very good. Excellent, Cooper, and excellent, James there. So x2, you can see here, that's my x2, and I labeled it as 0. So it is 0 minus, what's my x1? Minus 1. Very good. So that's my x1 there. So if you follow it without trying to skip the steps, it should work out. Okay, now notice here, this is where the mistakes are. It's usually x2 minus x1. So it's x2, which is 0, minus, now notice x1 is a -1. So you should write minus -1. Now we know that when you have double negatives, what does that become? Positive. It's the same thing as saying adding. So in your next line, it should be 3 minus 0, which is 3. But then these two negatives is plus. So 0 plus 1, and that's how you get 3/1. So if you've done it correctly, it should come out as 3 divided by 1, which is 3. So you've just found out m equals 3. So this is exercise 9F. So I've got some videos there. If you wanted to practice that, I teach you how to find m. What I haven't taught you is to find the final piece of the equation with c. And now this is a very easy part, but it also means you have to use your algebra. Okay, so this is where algebra comes in. So here we go. I'm going to show you. How do you find c? There are 2 ways. Now, most of you might have figured this out already by looking at the graph. Later on, you're not going to get a graph. You have to be able to figure out without the graph. There are 2 ways. So I'm going to do it a graph way. Graph way is the easiest. If you've got a diagram, you can see it. Remember, what does C represent again? Y-intercept. So if you look at the graph, which of these 2 points is the y-intercept? 0, 3. Because that's where it crosses the y-axis. Where does the straight line touch the y-axis? It's at 0, 3. So the y value, which is 3, that is my C value. Okay, so that's the easiest way to tell what your C value should be if you have a y-intercept. Okay, so when you see x equals 0 anywhere, that's one of the key things to note. If you see a coordinate with 0 there, where it's x, that y value is your C. Okay, so I now know C just from the graph. So I'm going to write here from the graph. I know that 0, 3, this is my C. Okay, so together, what's my equation? It was y equals 2. I found m, which was 3. That was 3x. And c, we just now figured out was 3. This is the equation if you had a graph and you could see the y-intercept. Okay? But what if you don't? What if you don't see the y-intercept, or you can't see it, or you don't know the value? This is the second method, which is what I want you to learn. Okay? So here's your second method. This is where you use algebra to solve the problem. You have this equation here. You currently have y equals 3x plus c, because you found out m. What you don't have is c. How do you find out c? Very easy. Okay, this is a very easy part, but it practices you understanding what you're doing here. See that straight line? It has infinitely many coordinates, but there's only 2 that we know. On that coordinates, we have -1, 0, and we also have 0, 3. These are the only 2 that we can tell from the graph. The beauty about it is, what this tells us is that these points follow the rule. These points are part of the rule. So what does that mean? That means that whatever x is, if I put it into my rule, I should get whatever the y value is. Okay, so it has to be the points on the line. Can't be any random points. It has to be the points that the line crosses through. So what this means is, if you want to find out c, you just need to substitute either -1, 0 or 0, 3. Doesn't matter which one. It'll work out. Both of which will give you the right answer. Doesn't matter which one you do. Okay? But it has to be the point on the line. So I'm going to choose to sub -1, 0. Okay, I'm just going to try that one first to show you this is how you'd solve for C. So I'm going to sub -1, 0 in. This is my X. This is my Y value. So according to the rule, I now know Y is 0, 3, which is my M, times X, which is my -1, plus C. This is the only part you have to use algebra to solve it. So here we go. 3 times -1. What's 3 times -1? -3. So this is -3 plus C is equal to 0. But remember, I don't want -3. I just want the C. How do I get rid of this -3? Add by C. Okay, not times because usually it's timesing. But this is not timesing. This is a -3. Add with C. So that there, I'll need to do the opposite of -3. So opposite of -3, we know it's add 3. So I'm going to add 3 on both sides. Add 3. Add 3. Now let's have a look. What's -3 plus 3 again? 0. -3 plus 3 is the same thing as writing 0, which is why you now have C is equal to 0 plus 3 is 3. So you can see that both methods, this is obviously easier if you can have a graph and you can just look at it. But later on, you'll find that you're not going to have graphs. You're only going to get 2 points, and it doesn't matter which 2 points. You will always be able to figure out C as long as you use one of those 2 points. Okay, so I'm going to do another one. I'll do another one where it's not graph, and you can see how I go from the beginning. Find M, exercise 9F. This one, I'm now teaching you how to find C. That's what you're doing mainly next year. Okay, what changes next year is that you'll have fractions, negatives, and you have to be really proficient with it, but the theory doesn't change. Theory is exactly the same. Michael.
Isn't it, say you get 2 points, it's still, you don't need to do all the algebra, because if you've been given 2 points, you can just do whichever one has the 0 in front.
Very good. See, now you're thinking, you're being more critical. That's exactly what I mean. So you should be thinking about them. Now I'm going to do an example where it doesn't have the 0, okay? Here we go. Let's try this one. So this is what you will get. You will get 2 points. There's no graph. Listening? Shh. There's no graph. There is only 2 points. Your job is to figure out what is the equation. What is the equation? What is the rule that connects 1, 5, and 2, 3? That is where it's tricky for a lot of students if they didn't understand how we were building up to this. Okay? So we know this is a straight line. If we're connecting 2 points together, it has to be a straight line. So we know it's y equals mx plus c. If we can find m and we can find c, you've got the rule. Okay? So how to find m again? Let's go back to the rule. How do you find m?
mx plus c. Y equals mx plus c.
Yep, that's true. That's the rule. But I want to find m. How do you find m again?
y2 minus y1 and x2 minus.
Very good. And it doesn't matter which one. It literally doesn't matter which one you choose, 1 or 2. It will always work out. The reason why is because it's a ratio, and I don't want to confuse you all, but the point is you can choose any one of them to be first or second.
So we can just make, so then C would just equal 3.
No, because none of it is 0. You need the x to be 0 for it to be the 1 step. Yeah? So, this is what I mean. So 1, 5, and 2, 3, which one's your first point and second point? Doesn't matter. I can choose this to be my first one if I want to. So I'm going to call this my first point. This my second point. All right, listening. So if I call this my first and I call this my second, so I just swapped it around. Let's label them now. If this is my second point, then what's number 1? Which
X2.
reference is it? X2,
X2.
because this is the x coordinate of the second point. What's the 5 then?
y2.
Y2, because it's the y coordinate of the second point. What about 2 over here? What does this represent?
x1.
X1, and we seen the pattern? Then 3 has to be?
y1.
Y1. See, once you label it correctly, doesn't matter which one is first or second. Just got to label them. Shh. Write this down. Want you to be writing this down. So, y2 minus y1 and x2 minus x1. So I'm just following. Once you labeled them, y2, which is my 5.
Wouldn't that be 2?
Yes, the overall answer is 2, but I want you to write down the method. So y2, which is 5, minus y1, which is 3. And Logan was saying, wouldn't that be 2? Yes, but I'd like you to do question, method, answer. All right, lay it out clearly. Otherwise, if you make a mistake, the whole thing's wrong. Right, you have to get it right first. So y2 minus y1, we've got 5 minus 3. x2, which we labeled as 1, minus x1 is 2. So I'm going to write here 1 minus 2. So let's work it out now. So Logan said, isn't it 2? Yes. 5 take away 3 is 2. What's 1 minus 2? Negative 1. So together, m overall is 2 divided by negative 1. But what's 2 divided by negative 1? Negative 2 simplifies to negative 2. So you can see what you've learned from the beginning of the year. All of it comes together. Fractions, negatives, all of it comes back to sort of practice. So even if you didn't get it in the first term, you still practice it over the years. So here we go. We've got m now. We've done that. We've got m. We've got now the equation as y is equal to negative 2x plus c. I only need c now. If I can find c, I've got the rule for the 2 points. So what were my notes again? How do you find c? What did you have to do? What do you do now? So you found m. You substitute what? What do you substitute?
The first point.
It doesn't matter.
Or the second point.
Any point.
Any point.
Okay, so out of these 2 points, remember, these are the 2 points that you connected on the line. Both of them fit the rule. So it doesn't matter which one you choose. I would always choose the one that looks easiest. Okay, so you can have 2 points. Doesn't matter which one you choose. Choose one of them. My case, out of the 2, I'd probably do 1, 5. Just because 1 is nice and easy, right? You can do 2, 3 if you want to. It doesn't matter. Your answer, my answer will come out the same. So I'm going to sub. This time I'm going to try 1, 5. But it doesn't matter. You could have done 2, 3 and you'd get the same answer. So here we go. Let's solve it. This is my x value. This is my y value. So if I can solve for c now by substituting the values in, y is meant to be my 5 and x is meant to be my 1. So if I put it in together, this is 5 equals negative 2 times 1 plus c. Let's work it out. Negative 2 times 1, which is?
Negative 2.
Negative 2. You got plus c. Now this goes back to algebra. This is what you were doing in chapter 7.
7.
And how did you do that though?
Because you have to get from 5 to 5.
Very good. You need to get from negative 2 to 5, and you can see it as a number line, negative 2 plus 7, or how do you get rid of that negative 2? What's the opposite of negative 2? You add 2. Okay, so if that's a minus 2, it's not timesing, it's minusing 2. So then I would then say, add 2 on both sides. Very good. So what's the rule then? If you got C and you got M now, my rule has to be?
Negative 2x plus 7.
Perfect. Can you see what I'm doing now? We've got 7 as my C, M as my negative 2. Together, that's the equation. So you've learned so far how to sketch without ruling, without doing a table. And you've learned my last skill. This is the skill that I want you to learn. So next year, it's not any different. What makes it different is how well your fractions are. They'll chuck in more fractions. They'll chuck in more negatives. They'll chuck in, see that equation there? This is what we call a one-step solution. The only difference in year 9 and year 10 is how hard that step looks. The harder this step looks is just more fractions. That's it. Theory's the same. So stick to the theory, work on your basics. Chapter 7 is really key. If you want to do well for next year, practice chapter 7. That's what I've been training you to do. Okay? So that then ties all together for you to be able to sketch this point. So you learned from yesterday's lesson, you should be able to sketch that now. You should be able to solve for x in a set, y in a set, and you'll be able to sketch that graph. Okay, so you find an equation, you can sketch the straight line. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I want you to have a go with the second part. If you're up to that, if you're up to the second part, I want you to work out, especially the last 3. If you're confident, I want you to do these last 3. Okay, the last 3 there shows me you've learnt the skill. That's question 2, B, C, D. I want to see that skill. Okay, so you can do the entry ones. These are easier up here. But I want to see this. Okay, so I'll be collecting your sheets at the end. If you're not ready by the end, then tomorrow, make sure to drop into middle school or send me a photo of your work so I know that you've done the skills. Yeah, you can submit it tomorrow. I just need to know that you understand the skills. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video. You can watch this again if you want.